Slides, Developing and Accelerating Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions. Understanding the Fundamentals of the Longevity Economy Market. Logo, NIH, National Institute of Aging. November 2, 2021.
I'd like to formally welcome you to the Developing and Accelerating Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions, Understanding the Fundamentals of Longevity Economy Market. This is going to be a fantastic series, two-part. You'll learn more about the second part shortly, but we welcome you and we hope this will be a foundational segment for you.
Slide. Your feedback is important to us. Please share your feedback at link questionnaire.
Your feedback is really important to us. As I mentioned, we'll include this link in chat, but if you could please fill out that form, it should take no more than 3 to 5 minutes.
Slide. Featured speakers.
With that, I'd like to welcome our featured speakers here today. We've got some great experts for you. We have John Reinhardt, who is the EIR, also known as the Entrepreneur in Residence. John is supporting NIA at the National Institute of Health. We also have Brian Abraham. He's a Senior Director at Market Access and Patient Services at EVERSANA. And Beth Sanders. Beth is the founder and CEO at lifebio.com and the LifeBio Memory app. My name is Monique Larocque, and I will be your moderator.
Text, Senior Vice President, Ogilvy, FKH. Video feed, John Reinhardt.
We are recording this session, and we will share these slides.
Slide. Workshop format.
Quick overview on the format. So we're going to go into some fundamentals of the longevity economy.
John Reinhardt, CPA, MBA, Entrepreneur in Residence, National Institute on Aging.
We will talk about some fundamentals of reimbursement.
Brian Abraham, Senior Director, Market Access and Patient Services, EVERSANA.
We know that's a particular area of interest for many of you who have sent us questions already. And then we'll also apply that and show how an awardee has made her way in through navigating the longevity economy, as well as her experience as an awardee of the NIA-SBIR program.
Beth Sanders, Founder and CEO, LifeBio.com. LifeBio Memory app.
We will also want to hear directly from you, so please feel free to send us your questions and then we will go through them during the moderated Q&A. Next slide. With that, I'd like to welcome John Reinhardt.
Slide. Fundamentals of the Longevity Economy. John Reinhardt, CPA, MBA. Entrepreneur in Residence, National Institute on Aging, National Institutes of Health.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and I really appreciate the team that helped make this day happen. We had a lot of great experts that weighed in, and we have some great content for you. We're going to take you a little bit on a journey of discovery, a little bit of the background. I've been a digital health age tech entrepreneur since 1999. I've been specializing in age tech since 2009, and so I have a lot of great opportunity to sort of relate to all of you as a serial entrepreneur. I've been through funding and been a funder, and I've been through managing and starting enterprises, and then the struggles that are involved. And I still actually am active in a couple of ventures in the space. But the reason I put and helped organize with our team this series is because I think age tech and digital health and aging as a whole is a very interesting niche and a very broad topic and a very sophisticated topic until you break it down in pieces. So today, hopefully, we're going to break down in pieces this idea of what is the longevity economy, what is the market space, what are the pieces of the market.
Slide. About the NIA Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions series.
Now, this is part of a workshop series that we've done at NIA. NIA is a great resource for people on two fronts. One, we're looking at funding and sending awards to people that have great contributions to science. And then secondly, we're looking at commercializing those discoveries to improve quality of life and quality of care for aging. So we are archiving these workshops, and you'll see that the NIA Office of Small Business Research. If you want to go back and revisit this two-part series, we'll have that for you taped. The two parts, the first day today is a fundamentals discussion. We're going to lay the groundwork.
Slide. NIA Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions series.
November 9th, we have 3 one-hour panels that are going to be fantastic. The 3 one-hour panels are what I call the sort of fundamental pieces for every entrepreneur to understand. One is how do you find seniors that live in communities that could be pilot partners and customers? Because these communities, as we'll see in a little bit, have a multifaceted approach to the types of seniors that live there, their needs, and their needs are not just the acuity of their health care, but their life needs and lifestyle needs. The second panel we have is about accelerators. My good friend Mary Furlong is going to host that panel, and she's going to host it with the AARP Innovation folks, the Techstars folks, and the Thrive Center folks. And they're going to talk about how are their programmatic approaches, whether it be experiential, network-based, expert and integration-based, really helps build out value propositions and business models and helps you perfect and know and understand how to communicate your discovery and your solutions. And then the third panel, I call it growing or scaling your venture. The third panel is going to be hosted by Lolita Robinson, who's a great fellow EIR with us. She's at the seat at the NIH level. She's going to host a discussion with the CDW, the head of CDW Healthcare, one of the partners at Seven Wire Ventures, and one of the partners at Cake Ventures. So we're going to have an angel and a seed funder, and we're going to have a professional venture capital firm, and we're going to have one of the lead technology distributors in the space, all be discussing sort of how to grow and scale your venture.
Slide. Pyramid no longer, the silver tsunami in the US graph, USH pyramid. 4 colors, 2050, 2000, 1950, 1900. On the left is males in millions, on the right is females in millions. Along the vertical axis are age intervals of 4 years at a time. The bar gets smaller as they rise except for the last one, age 85 plus.
With that, let's try to start unpacking the longevity economy. So the longevity economy was first sort of coined and has been used now frequently from a book written by a friend of ours, Dr. Joe Coughlin at MIT Age Lab. And they started trying to define the economic impact of the over 50 market. So in this graph, we have in the dark green, we have the 1900s and the population of females and males in millions in the middle of the graph. And it looks like a straight up pyramid. And if you look specifically at sort of over 65 and over 70, the pure number of people, whether they're male or female, the pure numbers of people are very small in the 70 plus market. By 2050, the second shade of green, you see it is still filled out. It still looks pyramid, and births are still very much outweighing the senior population. And then as you move to 2000, which we're in today, you start seeing that our curve is no longer straight up and down. We do, and in the book, there talks about a female-led population. So females slightly outweigh males in terms of pure gender numbers. But the other very interesting fact is these new markets of the 70 plus, the 80 plus, the 85 plus markets are brand new. They've never been existing before. And by 2050, we are really no longer, the Sylvia tsunami is no longer coming, it is here. Just a couple more comments. To try to assess this longevity economy by age, as a CPA, everybody thinks of numbers. Age is just literally a number, but typically people seem to feel younger than their age. When I was a younger person, 50 seemed old. Now that I'm mid 50s, 90 seems old. But when I'm 90, I would think 110 will feel old. But I think it's a misnomer to try to look at the longevity economy by the numbers or by the gender, because I think the diversity of this economy is really built in ethnicity, ethnic diversity, geographic diversity, and even social economic diversity. And I think we'll see as we unpack that those elements are just as important as ages and genders. And I hope that you take away from that we really have to look at human-centered design in our innovation and our solutions and not get caught up in just, and in fact, I think age sometimes is a bias. We bias on age or number of years, and I don't think that's the best way to look at this.
Slide.
Okay, so by the pure numbers, in 2050, in that farthest outlier of the original graph, 2 billion people will be over 60 worldwide. Think about that. 2 billion people will be over 60 worldwide. But we're talking today about the US specifically, and we're talking about the most recent numbers in the US. The most recent number in the US is currently our aging population, and I try to restrain from labels like seniors or older people, but our aging population is made up of three psychographics: the silent generation, born in 28 to 45, the boomers, born in 46 to 64, and the Generation X, born in 65 to 80. So right now, in the midst of these are the over 50 population that we're talking about as longevity economy folks, but they cross over three different cohorts. And then the bottom comment there is very interesting. By 2028, Generation X, the number of folks that are Generation Xers will outstrip the number of folks that are boomers. And so in less than 20, less than a number of years, a handful of years now, Generation X will be the predominant population here. But then the sort of the bad news at the bottom, to guide healthcare, 30,000 geriatricians are said to be needed in the US. And as of February 2018, we have 7,300. So the question is going to be, if we're going to continue to live well, which I'm going to propose is really the goal. The goal is to live well. It's to have wellness or well-being. It's not to have good sick care, though good sick care and good health care is a component of living well. Geriatricians are going to be needed. Experts in aging and aging health are going to be really a key component of what we need to figure out.
Slide. The untapped potential of the longevity economy.
So when we talk about just the longevity economy as it exists today, we know it crosses over the three cohorts I just mentioned. We're talking about 106 million people. 106 million people over 50 in the US as the longevity economy description now. What we see those people spend annually is $7.1 trillion. $7.1 trillion is the economic impact of those 106 million people. The interesting contrast here, and this is a referenceable slide to the source. We've added the sources on slides with links. But this is really the contrast here that I want you to see is, of the $7.1 trillion in economic spending, only 1.6 of that 7.1 is spent in healthcare. So there's a lot of money going into longevity, wellness, life being, and quality of life that's not just healthcare spending. So as an entrepreneur, you can't really make this about good healthcare solutions. It has to be about good quality of life solutions, and health is a component.
Slide. 8 dimensions of wellness. A shape. The center is labeled 8 dimensions of wellness. The pieces that surround it are 8 different kinds of wellness: social, physical, occupational, spiritual, environmental, emotional, financial, intellectual, social.
So going into a concept that I really have discovered, especially in the last 12 years, of specifically focus on aging and aging innovation, is this concept of dimensions of wellness. So when I think of what the quest people have, the quest people have is to live well or be well or believe they are well. And when they believe they are well, there's a great slide. Sometimes it's 6 dimensions, sometimes it's 8 dimensions, but these are the components of the dimensions of wellness. So when I look at the quest is, does your solution, does your innovation, does your discovery really meet people where they want to be, where they seek to be, where they feel confident and they're thriving and they're excelling in their well-being. And so the two things that come to my mind are isolation and maintaining independence are 2 big drivers of wellness. And we've unfortunately, and we'll have a slide here in just a second on the recent activities, but the key element here is we've got to go down from the numbers and the ages and the genders and even ethnicity. We've got to go into a deep dive in human-centered design. So guidelines for how you design your solution that are products and services and experiences that have technology components. It's not all about technology, but there's a great report by IDEO I've referenced. It was after the slides were completed, but I'm referencing today because they talk about this concept of it has to be desirable, people want it, it has to be feasible technically, and it has to be viable as a business. And I think all these fit very well into this dimensions of wellness, but these are individuals. And so the 2 key takeaways I have from the IDEO report that I referenced, and they did one on isolation and one on Retaining Independence was 80% of the people surveyed by them in their report said they feared decline even more than death. They feared decline and loss of abilities even more than death. And the other comment I took away that I think you'll appreciate is they want tools they own, not tools that own them. So when you think about digital health and age tech, tools they own, but not tools that own them. So again, they don't want to be defined by their tools or the things that are attributes to help them live well.
Slide. The COVID effect. Chart. Pre-pandemic is on the left. Post-pandemic is on the right.
So the COVID effect is very profound in terms of digital health, in terms of age tech. So we have a pre-pandemic and a post-pandemic look at what people did with technology as it related to living well and health. And so this slide is an excellent slide that talks about the immense impact the pandemic had on enabling us and equipping us to be successful in a digital health world. 20% of adults 60 and older had used a health app, but basically 92% after the pandemic have done virtual care of some kind. 20% were willing to try virtual care. Now 92% have used it. 60% have embraced technology more than ever before because of the pandemic. And then telehealth, we all feel that it's sort of a key component. 4% pre-pandemic had ever participated, now more than 30%. So the market and the user have met up because of circumstances to open a wide array of opportunity for new solutions, new experiences, new products, new services that have technology-enabled components. But at the end of the day, care is still going to be hands-on and it's still going to be personal-centered, but technology sure helps reach and extend and make it affordable and effective and limits a lot of the obstacles that we had in the past.
Slide. Social Determinants of Health, SDOH. Diagram. The hub is labeled as Determinants of Health. The spokes are labeled as follows. Personal health practices and coping skills, social support networks, employment and working condition, physical environment, health services, biology and genetic endowment, healthy child development, education, income and social status, physical environment.
So when we go from wellness and we go into health ends up being more about what are the components that allow us to remain healthy, right? Well has some personal choices and personal interests, and it's very interesting because there are different personality types even in the different age groups that come into play. But when you talk about the health system, and many of you are going to be focused on solutions that go to health and go to health systems, you're going to hear this conversation about the social determinants of health. And the social determinants of health go far more than your doctor or your medicine or your condition. It goes into your genetics. It goes into your education, your social economic background. It goes into whether you're employed. It goes into your family circumstances and what your support network is. It goes into how your health and how your coping skills, we often overlook behavioral health, and the pandemic has brought to light the immense impact of behavioral health. But you'll hear the health systems talk about this broad range of health services as it impacts the social determinants of health. So if you haven't been in and you're not from a healthcare background, I wanted you to get introduced to this concept. There's lots of articles and stuff on it. But the next slide is going to show you a very interesting combination of what parts of care that the system can do, the system being what we're going to unpack are the levels of services, types of services, and service places. But what are the other components when you leave the service provider that lead to ultimately solid recovery and quality living?
Slide. Interventions to address social determinants of health are moving into care delivery models. Graph. A figure is filled in according to percent.
So this is a very good slide, in my opinion, on trying to break down how the social determinants of health are actually explained to an individual who is trying to have personal investment and personal responsibility. And that is one of our big challenges, to get the individual to invest in things and for us to invest in environments that can help them help themselves be successful in remaining healthy or remaining in good health. And in turn, big key attributes to well-being. So if you look at the bottom, access to care and quality of care remains a large obstacle across the swath of people we're talking about, whether it's transportation, whether it's insurance, whether it's a number of key factors. But access to care and having the guidance of nurse practitioners or physician assistants or geriatricians or specialists and generalists, that's always going to be. Urgent care has been very good at this. The retailers, we're talking about, all the major pharmacy retailers now and all the major even retailers like Walmart. We're hearing about models where accessibility is the main focus here. Affordability is also a secondary focus, especially around meds. But if you look at this slide, 20% of your ability to remain healthy lies with having access to care. Then healthy behaviors come into play. We all know about it. We all think about it. We all know it has an effect. But the study here and this research says that 30% relates to healthy behaviors. 10% is physical environment. This is really important if you talk about mobility, because if your house is not accessible, if you don't have a support network, if you don't have family, children, relatives, otherwise, coming home as I did with hip surgery and hip replacement, that would almost be impossible for me as an individual person to navigate without some significant intervention. And even so, when I'm here now, as I had the hip surgery, we had to do a lot of things around our physical environment. We also, for instance, and when going back to, this is not an age thing, our 32-year-old son has CP, cerebral palsy. And so our house has been equipped in a physical way for health and mainly for risk management, with a lot of attributes that are in older, what would deem to be older person's houses. So the physical environment is very important. And then social economic, this gets to tapping in with education, tapping in with programming, tapping in with funding and support, and tapping in with real consultative impressions to relate to the individual about what they can do and about what their attributes can be to their own health. And I think this continues to be sort of a big push for us to try to figure out how we can meet people where they are, whatever these top socioeconomic factors are, and then how we can provide them access, how we can help them modify behavior, and how we can point out things of risk that could be easily adapted that would allow them to remain healthy. So when I started as an entrepreneur in healthcare, like you,
Slide. An animated map, home to hospital to nursing home to tombstone.
probably thought, okay, I live at home, something happens, I go to the hospital, I end up in a nursing home, and then it's, death's around the corner. I think for a lot of us intuitively, we're biased in thinking the simplicity of this model. But secondly, there's a great fear about going to a nursing home. And I think when we lump things into general buckets like nursing home, and we lump things into this routing, this continuum of home, incident, goes bad, go to nursing home, then pass away, we miss what the market really is, and we miss the attributes of the market and the delivery parts of the market. And it's really just a big miss. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take this misnomer, this sort of very high level structure, and we're going to break it down to its pieces and components. I'm very thankful, and I said it to Brian before we started, he's going to add the insurance component. So you'll see that I'll mention insurance components very briefly when I go through the sectors of the longevity economy service delivery model. But he will go in more depth, so don't worry, he has better handle on the details of reimbursement. But I'm going to talk in a mix of the level of service, the level of customer that's in the service, how the service either generates revenue or has reimbursement. And for each section, I'm going to talk about some of the attributes that I've learned over time to share with you, so you can better understand the components of the longevity economy services model on the health side.
Slide. By the numbers.
So by the numbers, there's 15,413 skilled nursing facilities. So that equates to 1,236 beds. So 1,236 of the 106 million people can live in nursing homes from our longevity economy starting number, right? Of those, skilled nursing is really broken down into two components. And these numbers are all referenced. And again, you have the links. But the key is skilled nursing is really two levels of customers or residents. The one level of customer resident is truly a skilled rehab resident. And a skilled rehab resident is there for a fall or an injury to regain their competencies, i.e. therapy, to go home. The other one is a long-term care resident. A long-term care resident, this is where they live. This is their permanent home. And it's due to a number of the combinations of their economics as well as their health conditions and what they would need in terms of care on a regular basis. 11,698 home health agencies, 5,600 hospice providers, 5,200 hospitals. The reason I give you this is where the CMS, the Central for Medicare and Medicaid Services Division, reimbursement goes to. Every one of these organizations are registered and licensed by CMS to provide services, and they handle a large majority of Medicare and Medicaid residents and consumers in these delivery mechanisms.
Slide, the new horizon. Graph. The vertical axis is cost. The horizontal is days.
So why are we working towards home? All right, so this was a slide I did a number of years ago in a population health chapter we did to really explain why would people want, well, first of all, people prefer to live at home and stay at home. If you have to have room and board at your bed and your food and all that would be great. But also the economics of your lifespan is most people live at home most of their life. Their incidents of care and intersections with care are much smaller. So on the left side, we have cost per day. On the bottom axis, we have the number of days you're in. While hospital inpatient care is very expensive, depending on the surgery, and we just swagged it, or the procedure, or the reason to be in there, most of the hospital stays are 5 to 7 days, right? Ambulatory care is outpatient and you're at home living, but there is a cost when you have specialists and generalists. A lot of this goes into what chronic disease management costs today, especially with the people that are on multiple meds. And, sadly, a lot of our elders are on, 12 to 14 meds on an average. It's not easy. I always say it's not easy growing older, but it's not easy to manage things at that level. A skilled nursing facility, we just talked, 700 to 450 a day. That's on the skilled side. And then on the long-term care side, if you're in Medicaid or if you're in permanent residency in a nursing home, the key with a nursing home is it's 24/7 nursing care is $150 to $250 a day. So you can imagine a nursing home trying to run an operation on each resident's bed between $150 to $250 a day when they have 24/7 skilled nursing care. They have food, they have board, they have housekeeping, they have every attribute of any kind of hospitality feature. And this is the reimbursement. So you see a lot of angst about how can we get the reimbursement up so we can pay the caregivers appropriately, so we can have the quality. And so that's really interesting. Home care is less than $100 a day. And that's because we have respite care, and whether you're on reimbursed care or you privately pay as a family. But the key here is if consumers prefer, and the outcomes can be improved by the consumer being enjoying or appreciating being at home, then the new horizon is really going to be everything brought to home at whatever level it can be accommodated through technology. And that's why on this session, we brought up this old slide to give you the idea that the principles haven't changed, but now what's changed is the adaptability and the usability of technology is to provide virtual care has become an extreme explosion in ideas, innovations, and consumer acceptance and behavior are embracing it, as we saw earlier.
Slide, market segments. Diagram with boxes and labels. The left is labeled want-driven, the right, need-driven.
So the reason for this slide is not to tell you all the little nuances of every kind of component of these things, but it's really in that top axis. There's things we want to do, and there's things that we need to do. And acute care is we need to. Post-acute care is a combination of need and want and meeting the best outcomes. But there's this idea of a concept I like of pre-acute. And so pre-acute is the concept of trying to live well where you are. And so the end of the day, we want to look for preventative opportunities and care and community that can provide prevention. And we'll talk about the levels and details more of these other settings in the next couple slides.
Slide, the care continuum. An arrow points upwards labeled acuity. A map that travels through community-based care, acute care and recovery and rehab care. It reaches its peak in acute care and falls to the original level at the end.
So care is really a continuum. And now we're not talking about, we've moved away a little bit from quality of life and dimensions of wellness. We're into the pure care setting. And so I want to set the table for you with the idea that everything drives on acuity. Acuity is the level of health intervention that is required and necessary. As the intervention goes up, the level of skill, either a provider or diagnostic or intervention goes up. So in a community-based care setting, we have home and the fitness centers, the pharmacy and the retail physicians, and we start moving to urgent care and outpatient. This is, quote, the outpatient world. When we go to hospital, there's an incident and it's acute and it's immediate and it involves really digging into something specific. And then we come back out of acute on our way back out, and the rehab facilities deal with 3 or 4 kinds of therapy: occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy to move you back to home as quick as possible.
Slide, home health and home community-based services, HCBS.
So the first level of care would be care comes to you at home. So there's a great difference between home health and home community-based services. Home community-based services models are things like Meals on Wheels, housekeeping, visitation. They're really involved in more interaction and relationship. A lot of things that unpaid caregivers do as family members or as friends of somebody that's sick. Home health has 3 components. It has medical, non-medical, and private duty. Private duty being basically that the family pays or it's cash outpaid. So if you look, this was the number earlier about home health companies, 11,698 registered home health companies that do take the Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement. And the green box talks about how Medicare does its work in this space and how it does its reimbursement. I'm going to leave that for Brian to touch on, but you can see here, and we wanted to reference each area, what the primary, if it was reimbursable and if it wasn't out-of-pocket cash, what would be the reimbursement parameters. And this is that's what the prospective payment system is.
Slide, activities of daily living, ADLs.
So to get the idea of, before we move on to acuity, everything on the beginning parts of acuity and the regular living is ADLs. So ADLs, I've got them here. So mobility, moving about is transference, walking is the ability to put weight. Then you have toileting, sleeping, eating, dressing, bathing. These are things that all of us do every day without help or with limited aid. As the ADLs increase, meaning the assessment of each of these becomes more complex or harder for somebody to do, the level of care and support goes up. And so ADLs are really, besides physical ADLs, these are physical ADLs, there is cognition, or there is this idea of cognition. What's your competency cognitively? And so most living facilities that are, quote, independent, that don't have certain levels of care, will do a primary assessment on ADLs and the cognitive functioning to allow their residents to sort of meet the parameters to join their community.
Slide, senior living and assisted living communities. Numbered list.
So the most interesting model that is predominant in, especially in the nonprofit providers of services, is what they have senior living and assisted living communities that are combined, and it's known in the market as a CCRC, right? A CCRC, and actually on my panel, which will be the first panel November 9th, we have a home health company, and we have 2 CEOs of CCRC communities that will join us, so we can ask detailed questions about how they look at innovation, how they add in new items, and how they what are the resident needs, and how do they look overall at the future. But this idea of life plan communities is it's very similar to how you would join any other community, except you usually buy in, but you don't own a residence. So you buy in a condo, an apartment, patio home, and in that regard, you put a contribution towards your living in the community. When that part is done, there's always a monthly charge for the services in that community, but the services change as your needs change. So while you buy into the community at a base level, say an apartment or a patio home, as your services go up, as your ADLs decline, as your cognitive skills decline, you will be moved in the same community to other aspects of care delivery based on your needs. So a typical senior living and assisted living community has apartments and patio homes, and people living independently. They just live in groups, and they have group services, i.e. dining, activities, exercising, pools, a lot of very positive experiences for me and going around the country and experiencing the investment that's going on to meet the consumer interest here. Assisted living starts to begin where they maybe do housekeeping. They might do reminders on medications. They might do laundry. They might do, there's things that are assisted that are just helpful enough that you can live independently. You have some of that choice, but you also now beginning to get the services of the community. Memory care is a very good specific example where cognitively you're not intact, but physically you may be very well intact. So when that happens, they have special circumstances and trained caregivers and elements of the community that are built around your comfort and your programming and your needs that are specifically around people that have memory challenges. And I think even Beth will talk about a lot of the work. I think some of the great work they do is helping people retain and cognitive functioning and memory. And so we're looking forward to hear her comments. Skilled nursing, we talked about before, primarily about rehab. Long-term care, primarily about the later stages of life when you need 24/7 round-the-clock clinical care. Rehab facilities only are on these campuses for the people that live independently, that come over and need a hip, a joint, or some investment in recovery that is on the campus in dialysis. There's people that need that. And then a lot of them add primary care. So they'll have the physicians and people come to them on the campus. They'll have offices on the campus, and they'll do rounding and or office hours for the residents. And so Medicare is the primary payer in a lot of the rehabilitation, and that's what Brian's notated here. Medicaid is also a big payer for the long-term care side of this, but a lot of the CCRCs are private pay. A lot of them are families and the individual who's invested in their community where they live.
Slide, skilled nursing facility and long-term care. Numbered list. Text, 15,413 facilities representing 1,236,301 resident beds, 24/7 clinical care, full ADL services including lodging, dining, housekeeping activities, and therapy.
Skilled nursing, we had a high level of this. The only thing I'm going to add is the concept of managed care starts coming in here, as well as third-party insurance and private pay. You don't have to be Medicare or Medicaid to be in a skilled nursing long-term care facility. There are third-party insurance products that pay for your stay here, especially on the rehab side. And there is this concept of managed care, which Brian will go into more. It's a risk-based arrangement where a managed care company will reserve rooms in a skilled nursing or long-term care facility for their members that need that care. And they'll have a specific day rate that'll be a negotiated rate with the nursing home to reserve those beds for their members. And then private pay is very expensive, but some people do it. Most people that do private pay in this part of life, if the resources are available, they bring it to their house. The key element here is it is 24/7 clinical care, so round the clock, 365. And then it has the full ADL services of lodging, housekeeping, activities. It is a community and it has full services, and it's full services every day, all day.
Slide, acute care, numbered list.
Acute care, we all know this one probably the best. There are reasons to go as a hospital, as an outpatient. There's a new nuance of these ambulatory surgery centers and rehabilitation hospitals and LTACs. They're very interesting in that they're very specialized services. An LTAC would be somebody that was at the hospital, the recovery is plateaued, and a lot of the COVID folks unfortunately ended up with vents and trachs and long-term care needs. And some of the great providers in the market really do this service, and they very successfully rehabilitate people. It's just over a longer period of time, and it's slow and steady progress, but there's some great stories out there about how this service really helps. And the caregivers are fantastic and specialized. Surgery centers, we're starting to see more and more pull it out of the hospital. The hospital has a lot of overhead and cost that can be done if it's safe and effective. Ambulatory surgery centers are popping up. And then specific rehabilitation hospitals have been around for a while. The other one that is sort of trying to come back in is behavioral health hospitals. We do need more of them. We are short, and it is becoming a larger component of the overall well-being of folks. And I think we may end up seeing how that's going to be handled. It seems to be evolving back to maybe more specialized centers. And then hospice and palliative care, while there's this number of providers, they're not necessarily a physical space. They're programmatic that are either delivered by themselves or delivered in a skilled setting or a long-term care setting, or even a step-down unit at a hospital. Those are programmatics where the goal is not to cure, the goal is to comfort and to treat into life in a respectful manner, with no longer seeking curative or over diagnosis or over diagnostic interventions, but you're looking at this person's quality.
Slide, ambulatory care, numbered list.
Ambulatory care is what we normally think about. It's everything you do outpatient. We'll let Brian touch on the reimbursements. The three I'll mention that for our longevity economy, the dental, ophthalmology, and audiology. Audiology is being disrupted now because they're talking about no longer needing a prescription to get hearing aids and to work with over-the-counter. Again, another move towards the retailers. Ophthalmology has always had these this sort of retail clinics where you can get a quick eye exam and you can get eyeglasses. And this is my innovation. It's called reading glasses, and if I don't have them, it would change the quality of my life for sure. And dental, but these are three specific services as we age that become very critical. And durable medical providers are a specific group that provides the heavy equipment and the facilities. Each of the facilities has a contractor here that brings the stuff in and out as needed, especially the specialized equipment.
Slide, outpatient services.
Outpatient services is really around therapy and behavioral health. Telehealth, the reason I put telehealth at the bottom is the rehabilitation therapy. Occupational, physical, and speech therapy has been transferred to have elements of telehealth now. Chronic disease management has always benefited from telehealth. Medication management is very vital that we continue to focus on ways to look at stepping down meds or taking less meds for people, because talk about quality of life, nothing worse for quality of life than being over medicated or contradictory meds that you just don't feel good. So medication management, there's a lot of natural elements of natural substances and supplements that have been worked on or being brought to maybe enhance both the immune system as well as your mental mode. And I think that's going to be a big area going forward. Behavioral health, the pandemic has made this front and center, but it should have always been front and center. Mental health is just such a critical component. And then the telehealth revolution is really making all these vital, affordable, and accessible, whereas maybe not so much ever before, because even transportation was a big obstacle.
Slide, map of buildings with interconnecting lines. Retirement community, specialty care community, assisted living, family home, hospice, hospital, home.
So we just finished talking about the continuum as we know it from provider side on the services side. And this is the maze of what it actually is. So we have home to hospital to nursing home, back to assisted living, back to your own home, back to the specialty care center. You may end up at hospice at end of life. You may end up with a family member's home to have the multi-generational view of living well, which has really been a great support system going forward, which is one of my big banners is unpaid caregivers. We really need to figure out a way to make that an economic driver here. But this is really what the picture looks like. And hopefully we just scratched the surface today, but hopefully you get a good idea of what we're talking about, or a better idea now of the components.
Slide. 6 areas of opportunity. Graph. $308 billion divided into sections. 72% daily essential activities, 7% caregiver quality of life, 3% social well-being, 8% transaction support, care coordination 4%, health and safety awareness 8%.
So AARP did a nice study a number of years ago, and they updated it recently. But one of the things that always struck me as an entrepreneur is, where's my competitive market? What sector am I in? How do I tell investors what part of the market I'm involved in? And they broke it down to these sort of 6 functions: essential activities, quality caregiver, the caregiver quality life, social well-being, care coordination, transition support, health and safety awareness. This report is linked here, but I think one of the things for us as entrepreneurs is to figure out the domain we're focused on, figure out the consumer we're looking for, and then figure out the grouping that we're in that can be part of a broader picture to help investors understand where we sit and where we're going to market at.
Slide. Unpaid caregiver dilemma. Chart.
I couldn't avoid putting the demonstrative issue in front of us about unpaid caregivers. Being a family member and having a son that has caregiving needs for us has been, a labor of love, and it's something we're happy to do. But now, as we look just from 2015 to 2020, 53 million US adults are now caregivers that are unpaid, which is shocking. And they're not just caring for their mom and dad, they're caring for other people in their family circles. And how we're going to support them, how we're going to educate them, how we're going to make the financials work, because for every caregiver that becomes a full-time caregiver, unpaid adult caregiver, the economic job they walk away from has a real impact to their family. So we wanted to give you this data and leave that thought with you, that is a big unmet need and a big challenge as we move forward.
Slide. The use of technology can transform care for the aging population. Numbered list.
So what I would want to leave you with now is what I call the hot topics. And so if you're thinking about your solution or your innovation, I think you need to correlate it to the hot topics and the things that are moving in this circle, in this market, so you can communicate either how it relates, how it benefits. And there's 2 things. One, you can increase revenue typically, or increase market share, or increase value. Or 2, you can provide efficiencies or effectiveness, and usually that's reducing cost. Virtual care, I mentioned earlier, is becoming a predominant player. How can we move everything, including hospital time, to home with the proper care elements? Tele everything, I call it the Tele-X strategy, with reimbursement and parity of service, which means that if I'm in the office and I'm a doctor, or I'm on the teleprompter, I'm a doctor, I get paid the same thing. That's parity of service. So it didn't matter if it was your house or my office. It used to be, before the pandemic, telehealth was compensated less. And in rural areas, it was compensated for the equipment, but in urban areas, it wasn't compensated in the same level as coming in the office. But I don't want to miss the idea of therapy and psych, not just telehealth being a big deal, but I also have to comment that sometimes if it's an earache, it's awful hard to do a telehealth appointment and have value. Or dermatology, you can see sort of some level, but until you correlate with vitals and and actually touching an area or seeing it up close, awful hard to make an assessment. So we may not be able to ever get rid of the in-person value proposition. We just may be able to expedite and handle a broader accessibility and hopefully affordability. Remote patient monitoring, everybody likes this buzzword because it has a code, but what's the monitoring doing in terms of bringing value other than compliance and safety? And, you know, quite frankly, back to our first comment, do people like to be remote patient monitored? I haven't found very many yet that do like to be considered to be monitored all day, especially for privacy and security, but they're usually will give in with the idea that they don't have to leave their home. So we got to be very careful to balance that the consumer is really an individual and it's not really just somebody that, oh, they should just, you know, take technology monitoring. Robotics, the labor workforce shortage, those two go together, but robotics can provide workforce and workforce solutions that the lack of human capital sometimes will accommodate. But the problem with the workforce shortage, it's a very purposeful, great career. The compensation, the hours, the challenges, we really need to work on that and make that better. Loneliness, isolation, we talked about. Internet of Things, everything's smart something or other. What does the smart something or other really add, and how does it add value? Does it reduce cost? Does it add revenue? Does it involve consumer experience improve? I think you want to answer that question. I've heard so much about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data. I think Beth's going to share her story. This is a really hot area. The question is, who's going to get the data? Whose data is it? What do we do with the data? And what's this divide between legal risk and consumer preference in the data area? Personal centered care, everything should be transparency. We should all be able to have consumers should all have skin in the game. We should know what it costs and where to go, have choices. That's the whole big thing about the retail model coming on board. Patient portals, you should never go anywhere without your information. Technology should allow that to follow you wherever you go, whatever care setting.
Slide. Associations convene segments of the market. Numbered list. 1. American Association of Retired Persons, AARP Consumers, Argentum Senior Living, Leading Age and American Healthcare Association AHCA Skilled Nursing Long-Term Care and Assisted Living, American Medical Society AMS Physicians, American Medical Directors Association AMDA, American Hospital Association AMA Hospitals, Specialty Disease Focus Heart Lung Stroke Alzheimer's Cancer etc.
Quick comment, there's always an association for that. So whatever part of the market you decided is your sweet spot, whatever type of customer and organization you're interested in, just reference the society. And a lot of you have that I work with at NIA, and I think it's great. But there's always an association that can be a great guide for you on understanding the market, knowing the players. A lot of these have conferences, makes a lot of sense to get involved.
Slide. Key vetting questions.
All right, so the final questions are my advice to you. Answer these questions with authenticity and directness, and challenge yourself, right? Who's going to buy it? Who uses it? Is it private? Is it interoperable? Can it scale? Is it portable? What can it be sustainable? And then the last one I leave is for the user. User could be the consumer that experiences the effect of your innovation. What's the emotional, spiritual, and psychological impact of what you provided for them? And final tip, consumers speak with their money and their engagement. What's our listening skills? How observant are we on what we're hearing?
Slide. New week. Perspectives and insights from C-suite leaders.
All right, so real quick, I'm going to tee up again. November 9th is going to be fantastic. So the accelerators, the reason you care is they teach you customer discovery, you get business models, you practice your pitch, you have a pitch deck, you graduate demo day, you get networked in. That's really the value of an accelerator. You're going to hear from 3 of the best in the market on November 9th. Distributors and investors, you think about sales and marketing, technology integration, technical integration, implementation, training, security. There's nobody better than the folks that like a CDW that can take your product and put it to any kind of scale, put it to any kind of secure implementation. And so that may be a choice to go to market. And without the funding, all things are are slower than they need to be and harder than they need to be. But the types of funding, their participation on advisory boards with you, how they value your company. And then the beautiful part about NIA is, we provide non-dilutive funding in the tune of 135 million of awards a year, each year, which is fantastic, especially predominantly around Alzheimer's. But that non-dilutive funding can be used to get you something validated that the dilutive funding now comes in, your value should be enhanced. And so it should make it worthwhile to do a transaction and to make a proper partnership with a VC or an angel seed fund, because you've enhanced it with the award and you've done the right things on the market investigation, and you've developed a good value proposition and business model.
Slide. What will be your perspective at 100 years young? Image, 2 men.
So this is my grandfather. He made it almost 100, and you can see grandma barely in the back behind my head. But what's our perspective going to be at 100 years young? At 100 years, we're going to feel young. He felt young. Think of all the things he had seen. He died about 5 years ago. Think of all the things I'm going to see. I'm 56. Think of all the things you're going to see and all your kids are going to see and your parents saw. And I think at the end of the day, everybody has a perspective, and we need to keep that in mind. But what a fascinating journey, and what a rewarding part of life to be doing something for the value of lifelong well-being. And I just thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me. And I look forward to, with my partner, Diane Ignor, and the NIH EIRs and all the CEDA EIRs, if you're an entrepreneur and you're in our awardee group, we'd love to help you and work with you and be involved with your team and learn from you. And with that, I think we'll be moving to the next speaker. And Brian, it's all yours.
Slide. Fundamentals of Reimbursement. Brian Abraham, MPA, Senior Director Market Access and Patient Services, EVERSANA Life Sciences Services LLC. Video feed, Brian Abraham.
Hey, John, and really appreciate the perspective you brought and showed the group today. Before we get into this, I just want to let you know a little bit of background about myself and about EVERSANA. So I've been in the market access and reimbursement space for more than the past 20 years, working on the biopharma side as well as medical devices, and now, of course, digital health. EVERSANA is a complete commercialization company. And what that means is that we help companies get their products commercialized, either by providing a whole infrastructure to a company, so that if your core is developing applications or developing a product and you need a way to get that out into the market, we can help you accomplish that. So, reimbursement and market access is part of what we do. There's also marketing, there's distribution, there's getting things into the channel, and that's the primary thing that EVERSANA helps with.
Slide. Insurance landscape.
So with that, I did want to talk a little bit today from kind of a 30,000 foot view of what insurance is all about here in the US, and how you can leverage, the third-party payers as part of getting your products into the market. So here we have public payers, at least I'm going to give you the major public payers, and private payers, and this is our entire system. So of the public payers, we have Medicare, which John also talked about. It's public insurance for persons age 65 and older and some with disabilities. 62.4 million enrollees, and it's funded by the federal government and by beneficiary premiums, including from the current workforce. And the reason I say including from the current workforce is when you look at your W-2, you see that there are deductions for Medicare, or even your periodic paycheck. There are deductions for Medicare, and those go into that trust fund now to be used for you later once you're eligible for Medicare. So it not only is paid for now by the beneficiaries who are paying their premiums and who are paying their cost share when they're getting services, but we also pay into it in advance. Medicaid, on the other hand, is also public insurance, but it's for low income or a no income population, including the disabled. There are 76.5 million enrollees. It's funded by federal and state governments. And all of the coverage policies are developed by each of the state governments in which there is Medicaid, and there's Medicaid in every state. That is opposed to Medicare, where the coverage policies are generally developed centrally. They are to an extent developed locally, but those are through Medicare contractors, which contract with the federal government. On the private payer side, there's commercial insurance or private insurance. Those terms can be used interchangeably. For the most part, the largest piece of commercial or private insurance is employer sponsored, and that's at 158 million enrollees. There are individual or group plans, also known these days as the exchanges, and those are 13.7 million enrollees. And for the most part, each plan is funded by premium and patient co-pays or co-insurance. And the policies are developed per plan. So there are lots more policies. And when I say policy, I mean whether or not an insurer will pay for an item or service. So those policies are developed at the payer level. They could be developed at the plan level, and the sponsors, if they're employer sponsored, the employer may say, we want this level of benefits. So they are also participating in developing those policies. Next slide, please.
Slide. Overview of the U.S. payer market. A chart. A pie graph. Insured in U.S. in millions. Employer 158, 50%. Medicaid 76.5, 24%. Medicare 62.4, 20%. Military 4.4, 2%. Individual 13.7, 4%.
So this is just a little bit of a different picture of the payer market, and you can see really where everything shakes out. The other larger public payer is the military. The federal government also is a premium source, and for those military dependents, that is families of the military, those families are also do pay into the premiums and do pay into the payments for the services. And then just at the bottom, you'll see that, while Medicare is third in the number of enrollees behind the employers and behind Medicaid, it's the leader in policy and payment setting because it has the highest concentration of beneficiaries from a single policy-making source. So when Medicare makes a policy, really the commercial plans follow suit and Medicaid follows suit behind them usually. But it takes a while for everyone to come into line.
Slide. Insurance payment. Medicare as benchmark. Chart.
Next, please. Okay, so let's use Medicare as the benchmark as we just talked about on the policy side. We'll also talk about it on the payment side. So there are 4 parts to Medicare, and you might hear this tossed around, when you talk about Medicare payment, different parts of Medicare, Part A, B, C, and D. So Part A generally is institutional. For the most part, it's inpatient hospitals, which also includes long-term care hospitals and skilled nursing facilities that we talked about earlier in the presentation. Part B is generally outpatient services or clinical services. That's where the physicians bill, other clinicians bill into Part B, hospital outpatient departments. In other words, when there are no inpatient beds being taken up. And Part B is also where the durable medical equipment is billed, and Medicare has this payment schedule called the Durable Medical Equipment, Prosthetics and Orthotics and Supply Schedule, or DMEPOS as they call it. That could be where some of your products end up, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then I'm going to skip to Part D because that's a prescription drug plan. It's pretty straightforward. There are several prescription drug plans, at least 1 or 2. in every, they try to put it in every zip code. I would say there are at least one or two in every locality. Those prescription drug plans can be standalone plans, and patients or Medicare beneficiaries who have Part A, they might have Part B. They can also subscribe to Part D, as in dog. And so, you know, that's sort of putting it all together piecemeal. Or Medicare enrollees can enroll in Part C or managed care. And those are also known as Medicare Advantage plans. It's about 40% of Medicare beneficiaries these days. They do still pay into, you know, they pay premiums into Part A and Part B, but by paying into the Part C premium, generally it's a higher level of benefit using the managed care network that Part C has. And most of the Part C plans also roll in the prescription drugs. So the beneficiaries generally don't have Part D, don't have to participate in Part D because they get that drug benefit as part of the Part C. And just as a quick note, not all of the Part C plans, not all of the Medicare Advantage plans, also the beneficiaries also would not pay into A and B all the time, depending on what the premium is for Part C and whether or not that Part C benefit actually takes care of those premiums. The other piece of Medicare Advantage plans that may be particularly relevant here are special needs programs, institutional special needs programs, and dual eligible special needs programs. And those generally have to do with the skilled nursing facilities and taking advantage of, you know, what the communities that John was talking about earlier. The dual eligibles, when we talk about dual eligible Medicare patients, they are dually eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. So they have very low incomes. They also probably, they are either disabled or they probably meet the age requirement. So they would be able to be enrolled in both Medicare and Medicaid. And that's what dual eligible means. Next, please.
Slide, insurance payment, Medicaid and commercial.
So how do these insurers really pay for the services that are provided? Well, we talked about Medicare just now. For Medicaid, it's fee for service or managed care. Managed is growing steadily, and in fact, most states are now requiring Medicaid beneficiaries to enroll in managed care. There is a federal minimum level of benefits that Medicaid has to pay out for. And the reason that there's that minimum level is because of the federal funding that each state gets. States can provide more than the minimum level of benefits. And in fact, every state does through prescription drugs. It doesn't mean that they cover all of the prescription drugs, but they do have to have, if they do cover prescription drugs, there is a minimum set of drugs that they also cover. And then each state determines what the payment level is for the items and services that they cover. For drugs, for instance, also for the devices and other products that are supplied to Medicaid beneficiaries, there are rebates and discounts that are imposed in order for Medicaid to pass those on to the beneficiaries. On the commercial side, the payments are through either preferred provider organizations or health maintenance organizations. We would call health maintenance organizations really a closed system like a Kaiser or an Intermountain Healthcare. We would call preferred provider organizations or PPOs, where there's a network, and if you go outside of that network of physicians or of hospitals, you're penalized financially as a patient. And then there are specialty plans as well, for instance, long-term care plans that you pay a premium for, and if you need that benefit, then it's paid out. The funding sources are, of course, on the commercial side, premiums. On the Medicaid side, generally no premiums are paid. It's funded by the state and federal government. But there's also cost share obligations. Again, on the commercial side, it's either a co-pay, which is a flat rate, or a co-insurance, which is a percentage. For the most part, under Medicaid, it's a very low cost share obligation. Usually it's no more than about $10 for services. And there are also health savings accounts and FSAs, which have their limitations, but they are also used to pay for items and services, and those are funded both by employers and by the members themselves.
Slide, broad insurance landscape, insurance types.
Let's look at the different types of insurance that are part of all of these types of insurers. So there are managed care plans run by the managed care organizations, or MCOs. As I explained a few minutes ago, they have lower premiums and cost shares and potentially richer benefit structures balanced with a limited network. An example is Medicare Advantage. Secondary payers, Medicare almost always pays secondary, meaning they pay after everyone else. In the dual eligible system, where there is a secondary payer, the patient is eligible and enrolled in both Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare would pay second there. Those special needs plans for Medicare Advantage enrollees. There's also programs for all-inclusive care for the elderly, or PACE programs. Those are Medicaid eligible programs and community-based. And then the prescription drug plans, which are often covered under Part C, but standalone, it's Part D under Medicare. Next, please.
Slide, coding overview, bullet points.
So how do we, the suppliers or the manufacturers, get paid for the products? Well, generally, the way that really the money flows is that as a manufacturer or as a supplier or a producer of these items, we would sell it into the healthcare systems. That is, we would sell it into hospitals, we would sell it into DME suppliers, we would sell it to pharmacies. Whatever we produce, there's probably a third party that would take it before it ultimately gets to the patient. And those third parties are generally the ones who bill Medicare or who bill the insurance company. And they bill them using all of these codes. When we talk about codes, that's really the language that's used on medical bills, on pharmacy bills, to get to that eventually the payers will adjudicate and pay for. So at the top, we see CPT, or current procedural terminology. This is mainly physician services. It's procedures. It's what the doctor bills the insurance company, or Medicare or Medicaid. CPT is generally administered by the American Medical Association. Then there's what's called HCPCS, or the Healthcare Common Procedural Coding System. Mostly, there are products that are identified through the HCPCS system. Drugs are mainly identified through the HCPCS system, and that is administered by CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Then there are diagnosis-related groups, or DRGs. Those are inpatient hospital codes based on the discharge, and that's administered by CMS. That is what Medicare uses under Part A to pay for hospital stays of Medicare beneficiaries. On the home health side, in Medicare, it's the PDGM, the patient-driven groupings model. Then on the other side of things is the ICD-10 system, which is the system that identifies diagnoses. So when we make a claim to one of these payers, generally there has to be, well, what did you do and why did you do it? The what did you do is either the CPT or the HCPCS code, could be the DRG. The why did you do it is the ICD-10 diagnosis code. Why did that patient present? Whatever the diagnosis was is the reason. On the hospital side, we also use hospital procedures under the ICD-10 PCS system. Those feed into the DRGs, and that's how they calculate what the payment for the DRG reimbursement will be. And then these last two are FDA driven, and those are NDC numbers and UDI numbers. The NDCs are for all drugs, all pharmaceuticals, and they are not actually used generally on the in Medicare on the claims for services, but they are most often or almost always used on the Part D side, on the prescription drug side, whether it is in the commercial space or the Medicare space or the Medicaid space. So those are important on the drug side for the pharmaceutical manufacturers, and the UDIs are for the device manufacturers, and those also are administered by the FDA. And very often those UDIs are used when there is a product that is not given as part of a procedure or isn't identified by one of the HCPCS codes. So all of that, I realize, is kind of down the road for maybe this group of entrepreneurs, which is, you still may be in, just beyond the conceptual stage, or you're building things up. And that's fine. But what you want to be doing is thinking about, okay, which channel do I want to go in? What piece of the patient population am I going to be targeting, or is this product going to be targeting? And how do I get in there? And then once you think about that, then kind of these coding pieces fall into place. I hate to say it, but it's true. I mean, there are consultants who could help you figure out, which piece of the coding, which channel, and which payment system to work with, and how to maximize your product through that payment system. Next, please. Yeah, and so I think that just finishing up on this, really what we want to be able to say is, okay, as I think about how I want to get my product into the market, I also need to think about the setting of care that product is going to go into, and how that setting of care is reimbursed, and what codes are going to be needed optimally and eventually in order for that product to get paid. And with that, I'll hand it over to Beth.
Slide, NIA awardee story, Beth Sangers, founder and CEO, lifebio.com, Life Bio Memory App. Video feed, Beth Sanders.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, John. Great job. I really quick want to give you a little bit of an overview of my company, Life Bio, and what we have gone through as a small business innovation research grant recipient from NIA.
Slide, the first research-based life story app powered by AI. Timeline from January 1st, 2020 to May 2022.
We got started on July 31st, 2020, and it has really helped accelerate our growth and advance our platform. And so I want to just talk to you really for the entrepreneurs out there and for others listening, how can you apply for, when, utilize SBIR program to advance your technology in your business. So this event is really important because new digital health and age tech solutions and research behind them are the solutions we need for America right now. As John said, the size of the aging market is huge, and NIH's mission is to enhance health and extend human life and reduce burdens of illness and disability. So we won a 2-year, $2.49 million direct to phase 2 SBIR grant. And like I said, that happened in July 2020. This timeline on screen, if you kind of track it as I talk, please do. But my first tip for today is to think big and boldly about what is possible. So your application for the SBIR program must be novel and innovative and include research. And, really think about how can funding help your company go where no one has gone before. So look at the funding opportunity requests from the National Institute on Aging and address an area that is of particular concern. For example, in our case, we address solutions for Alzheimer's disease. And in our case, we also had a HIPAA compliant web-based platform already for telling life stories. We were already working with organizations serving people living with dementia. We already have research studies behind our work. So we knew that knowing more and making it easier to tell people's life stories would improve the quality of life and quality of care. We knew we had a chance of improving person-centered care and memory care and making it more engagement happen with people living with dementia. What we did not have was a voice-powered app that was ready for both iOS and Android. We did not, at the beginning, before we won this, have AI incorporated. So we didn't have artificial intelligence incorporated to immediately process the complexity of these life stories. And we had no quick and simple way to summarize the story. And that was what was needed in healthcare and senior care settings. So we knew we need specialized developers, we need data scientists and such. And we had, never had the bandwidth or funding before this grant to work with a research partner to conduct focus groups and get in-depth feedback on what would work and what would not work for people living with dementia and their care partners. So we needed that clinical trial to measure outcomes in a big way. And so that's what we proposed, is that, like I said, what's that big idea? Get big and bold with that idea and put it out in your grant application. And we needed to build that relationship with our research partner, Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging. So we won the grant, like I said, July 2020, following the timeline. And just so you could see the speed of what we had to do, by October 20th, 2020, we had a prototype, we had an MVP built, functioning and ready to go. Because that first round of focus groups with our partner, Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging, happened on November 10th, 2020. So I want you all to just think about the speed of development and what you have to put in place for agile development to make things really happen fast. So by December 14th, 2020, we were reading the feedback from the 35-person focus groups. They were groups of 5, and 5 of them had been living with dementia and were giving feedback on an app that would work for them. So the feedback from them was incredible. And Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging, our incredible research partner, helped us with the processing of that. We learned from that. And then we had support from our the whole NIA program with our help from John Reinhardt and others, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. There was a lot of support all the way along on that. And, the second tip I want to give everybody is to seek out help because it's there. So within NIA, at the very beginning, we met Todd Haim, we've talked to Joy Tolliver as the program after we submitted. Then we had help from Saroj Rajmi, the health science administrator. We had help from John Reinhardt, the entrepreneur in residence, during the course of our grant to give us feedback because we realized what we were building could be used in so many more ways than we had ever done before. So we had to rethink, retool, get ready to widen our market and also dig in on exactly what are our costs, what are our margins, how are we going to sell this thing in a different way, and use something called TABA, T-A-B-A. Remember TABA, technical and business assistance, can be a special part of your application to assist with commercialization. Most of this cannot pay for sales, cannot pay for accounting work or anything. TABA is supposed to help you with sales strategy, business strategy, intellectual property strategy, market research. So you've got to understand TABA as you're putting together your application. And then you just got to jump in and have people like John Reinhardt help you when you have questions that arise. So they have the support there. And if you just got to keep asking questions, there's really no dumb question. You've got to say what you need to know and get your strategy together. And so that was really helpful. And then also John was like, hey, you should be working with accelerator partners like the Thrive Center, and others gave us great advice. Mary Furlong, gerontologist Sherry Snelling. We work with education dementia experts along the way. So all I can say is it's a team effort, right? Everybody's helping as we are bringing this to market. It's up to us to understand what we need to do and lead and not wait for people to tell us what to do. We've got to take the bull by the horns and lead. But we launched Life Bio Memory on October 25th, 2021. That was last week. So that the pace of development is incredible, and to get the team on hand to make it happen is huge. Because I got to say, this is the most incredible development team, AI, UX, like I said, dementia care experts, educational help. When we were putting together the training program and everything inside, and once you've won one. Now we went ahead and we applied for a new SBIR phase 1, and we won that in September. So we will be working with Brown University to track the progression of Alzheimer's disease in our second SBIR grant. So, and I had to tell you, there's another idea in the works for us. We can just see other related, but very novel things coming down the pike for us. Last tip, go for it. You can do this. I remember hearing about the SBIR grant program and thinking this sounds really hard, but we found a way. And so creating this first research-backed life story app is amazing. And if you want to advance the slide, that would be great.
Slide, screenshots. Register each person to get started. Capture voices with question and photo prompts, AI-powered. On-demand video training, business intelligence reporting coming soon.
And I was in a California nursing home about 2 weeks ago now, absolutely using this app with people and seeing the impact that what we built could have on people and how simple. We're not writing, we're not typing. People don't have to do it in a hard way anymore. We can just hear their story, and every story, of course, matters, and to see it come to light. So you got to go for it. It'll continue to evolve. This grant for Life Bio Memory isn't finished until May. And so we're already, selling. We're already continuing to advance it and taking what we've learned from the focus groups and the upcoming clinical trials into account as we continue to advance. And so everybody, we're the Wright brothers of our time. So let's fly. What is your big idea? How are you going to go for it, make it a reality? One of my favorite lines in the office, and I think I scare people when I say it, these 2 words, what if? And so what if? And I just want to encourage you to go for it. This is an incredible program. America is supporting us as we continue to advance incredible technology. So that's what I had to say.
Slide, human-generated action plan. My name is Joan Murphy. I was born on September 17th. My late husband was Alan. My children are Judith, David, and June. I worked for Kodak. I attended Second Baptist Church. I volunteered with Meals on Wheels. I sang in a choir and danced with my husband. I collect leaves and press them. Let's talk about my family, including my sister, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Childhood memories: ice skating on the pond, Christmas traditions, playing golf and ping pong, music and dancing, crafts, sewing, watercolor painting, ceramics and pottery, collecting leaves, volunteering, church and Meals on Wheels. AI-generated action plan. My name is Joan Murphy. I was born on September 17th. I was married to Alan for more than 40 years. My children are Judith, David, June, and July. I worked at Kodak. I am a Baptist and volunteered at my church, Meals on Wheels, and church activities. I collect leaves and then press them into books. Let's talk about my family and our holiday celebrations. Soap operas guiding light, collecting leaves and my leaves. Art, painting, making jewelry, ceramics, pottery and painting. Golf, traveling, New Orleans, Niagara Falls and the Thousand Islands. Singing in my church choir. Volunteering at the Meals on Wheels program in church. Dancing with my husband.
Actually, you know what? Advance one more slide. I have one more thing to show you really quick. I forgot. Just wanted to say, you know what? This is the AI behind the work, the innovation. Like John said, you got to have this innovation in here. So on the left is a human generating a action plan, which is like a summary that we have of somebody's story. On the right was AI generating an action plan. You know, we're just so excited by the technology. So, and I want to thank NIH, NIA, and everybody that you know you are who've been helping us along the way.
Slide. Connect with NIA. Visit nia.nih.gov/SBIR. Follow us on Twitter at NIA_SBIR. Follow us on LinkedIn, NIA Office of Small Business Research. View upcoming events and funding opportunities. Join our mailing list. Questions? Email niasmallbusiness@mail.nih.gov.
Thank you, Beth. I love the inspiration and energy you bring to the table. And also thank Brian and John for all of your insights and perspectives. And thank all of you for listening and being a part of this journey and seeing how we can all work together to do some great things. I did want to just share that we would like you to continue to connect with NIA. As Beth mentioned, there's a whole future ahead and different resources and funding opportunities that are available if you are trying to innovate and create the next big thing in aging. So please feel free to visit our site. We would love for you to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And also a reminder to please fill out the feedback form.
Slide. Your feedback is important to us. Please share your feedback at link questionnaire.
The offer to meet with us is real, so feel free to email us and schedule that meeting with John and the EIR team. So if you look in chat, you'll see that there's a link for the feedback form, but also we will repost the feedback form link as well as an email. I did want to pause and see if NIA Director Chief Todd Heim wants to say a few words. Todd, are you there?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists. This was a great session. I really enjoyed it myself and actually learned a lot myself. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to our coordinating team. And I look forward to November 9th. Please do fill out the feedback form because it's instrumental in knowing if we should do this again. And get in touch with us. Thank you all.
Slide. NIA Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions Series.
Thank you, Todd, for the segue. So here's the information about the next session, November 9th, 1:30 to 4:30. There's going to be some great specificity around providers and value proposition and thinking about investors and distributors. So all this is designed to give you all the tools and skills you need to help. And again, if you want to meet one-on-one after these sessions, we're here for you. When you win, the public wins because we want great innovations hitting the market.
Slide. Questions? An icon in a navigation bar center left labeled Q&A.
I did get a few questions to go through. And so if you have any additional questions, please use the Q&A feature. You can see an example of what that looks like on your screen there. But you just click that icon and then you can put your question in and then we will ask it. So I'm going to get started with some of the ones we've received so far, and feel free to continue sending us a few more. So this can go to both, I would say, John and Beth. From your perspective, if someone's a recipient of an SBIR grant already, what else should they know about? What other opportunities, funding-wise or even program resource-wise, should they consider applying to once they get in the system?
I think Beth laid it out really nice. I mean, I think that you have the opportunity to have EIR consults. You have the opportunity to get TABA funding for special high value consults that are outside of the EIR network. The key there is, the consults need to be with specialization that's not inside your team. That's the main goal. If you need a regulatory reimbursement consult, those things fall into that category. I think the key is we have very good work with bringing researchers to entrepreneurship, right? So We have some diversity initiatives. We have some education initiatives that team members of yours that may be, post-terminal degrees that want to pursue entrepreneurship. There's a lot of programmatic ways they can be on your team, and they can be building skills and competencies alongside of this program. And I would tell you, as Beth would know, build good, bold ideas. The forms will take care of themselves. I would say my advice would be, don't try to just sort of structure to the form, structure to the idea, and then let the evidence-based lead you towards where you need to go.
Yeah, I just want to add, John will beat you up. He'll tell you what you got to think about, okay, in a nice way. I mean, I saw his link that was shared. I am scheduling again because it's time, or I continue to ask him for help. And he doesn't mind, I don't think.
The smart teams keep me live, keep me excited. So it's all engagement. We learn from you, you learn from us. We bring other parties to the table, Brian and so forth. It's just a matter of being engaged. Just be absolutely engaged, and we will point you in the right direction. And what do you think you need? The best thing to do is be self-aware of what you need and not be shy to sort of pursue what you need.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll just add that in addition to what you heard in terms of those one-on-one consults and TABA, we do have a diversity supplement, as Don was mentioning, some of those diversity initiatives. So this particular additional funding can help increase the diversity of your workforce. So that's not something that you can apply for. In addition, the NIA-SBR program does offer various opportunities to spotlight some of the awardees. So if you're looking for that additional visibility, sometimes they also do things with showcases so that they highlight some of the top awardees and put those awardees in front of VCs and investors. So lots of help that you can get from NIA by being an awardee. So feel free to really take advantage of all the opportunities that are available to you. The next question is for Brian. How should someone go about exploring reimbursement channels for medical devices?
Sure. So I think that, one of the things to look at is the first thing is, which patients, which people do you want to serve? Really, what is your device solving for, right? And then once you really look at that and you figure out, which patients they are, well, where are they getting treated? Where would they most likely use this product? Then once you know where they would most likely use the product, that's the channel that you would go through. So, if it's going to be in the home, they're going to use something, to help them with, I don't know, let's say to help them regain their gait, right, after they've had an incident. And it's going to be used in the home. Then it would probably be through the durable medical equipment channel, and then you follow that. So it really has to do with what the product is doing for the patient or for the beneficiary at that time, and where they're going to be using it.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question relates to senior nursing facilities and at-home care. So I have two questions in that regard. When talking about senior nursing facilities, what about assisted living facilities and home health care as two alternative segments based on the person's frailty and other factors?
So I think the slides we broke them out in three parts. Home health and home community-based services was the first sector, and that is your predominantly living at home services are coming to you. When we talked about CCRCs, we had a slide on assisted living and senior living communities. Those words are used interchangeably, senior living being more implying independent living, but assisted living is really the in-between of independent living and skilled nursing.
Slide, senior living and assisted living communities.
And so assisted living, depending on the state laws, sometimes you'll hear it referred to as personal care. And it's this idea of how much clinical intervention or how much individual intervention can be done with the patient that would not indicate it to be a clinical setting versus a life support setting. And so when I mention these communities, that doesn't mean that assisted living, skilled nursing, and home care are all not separate deliverables. They are. This is just a large campus that all of them are in the same geographical location. So you can move between them based on your needs, but then your neighbors are the same, the place is the same, you know, that you're comfortable. It's like you're living in a neighborhood and moving houses around. Each of them are very distinct care settings and very distinct different deliverables. But I think don't get confused that this community has to have all of these. It can have some of these or a portion of these, but most of them do offer all of them. So you stay with them for your lifespan as when you move in as an independent person.
Thank you. When you look at trends, where can someone find more information about how many non-medical based home health care agencies there are in the US and what are the average client per agency?
Slide. Connect with NIA. Visit nia.nih.gov/SBIR. Follow us on Twitter at NIA_SBIR. Follow us on LinkedIn, NIA Office of Small Business Research. View upcoming events and funding opportunities. Join our mailing list. Questions? Email niasmallbusiness@mail.nih.gov.
The interesting part about that is non-medical, there's a lot of franchisees. Because they're non-medical, they're not, quote, licensed under CMS. So they don't, quote, have to register. They would be normally, you know, you could look at any city and find a lot of them. It'd be a great question in terms of how Steve Hendricks looks at it. He'll be on our panel on November 9th. He is the Kentucky lead franchisee of Home Instead, which was just purchased by Honor. And that's one of the national chains of non-medical home health. They also offer elements of medical home health, but why don't we pose him to that in terms of how he does his market research on the competition? But I don't think it's, since it's non-medical, it's not traditionally registered with CMS, which is where the other data was garnered. The other data was garnered from CMS report filings.
Thanks, John. Back to reimbursement. What are some good examples of successful reimbursement models in your opinion, Brian?
Well, I think it just all depends on the product, right? I mean, in the device world, I think that, you know, what you want to do, and I mean, I guess it could be for, you know, therapeutic as well, but in order for a product to be successfully reimbursed, there have to be a couple of things. One is it has to be, you know, that product needs to be safe and effective. It doesn't necessarily have to have FDA clearance or approval, although that certainly helps. But also it needs to be what CMS calls, or what Medicare calls, reasonable and necessary. And in order for it to get to that reasonable and necessary threshold, many times, you know, CMS is really looking for how are patient outcomes improved, right? What difference is being made? Are they better off now than when they didn't have this product, or when they weren't able to access this product? Or is physician behavior changed, right? If a physician is has you know, been prescribing or been you know, using the same therapy over and over, and then something new comes to the market, or a new diagnostic tool comes to the market, is that going to change the way that that the physician behaves and say, oh, based on this diagnostic tool, I'm going to treat you differently, or oh, based on this new therapeutic you know, device or this therapeutic intervention, I'm going to use that because I think that the outcomes will be better. So it's really looking to, you know, the payers are really looking to see if the status quo is being changed in a positive way. And frankly, you know, without adding too much financial burden to the system.
Slide. Your feedback is important to us. Please share your feedback at link questionnaire.
Thanks, Brian. And considering that we're in a value-based model oftentimes for reimbursement. How do digital platforms such as virtual care work in a Medicare Advantage model?
Sure. So that's a really good question, and it's really timely. And John sort of touched on this with telehealth a little while ago. But I think that with more willingness by CMS and Medicare plans, Medicare in general, and then the Medicare Advantage plans, their increased willingness to use telehealth, to use digital applications, I think is becoming more normalized. And we're starting to see some additional codes, payment codes on the CPT side, as well as the HCPCS side, that are allowing for digital therapeutics. When we talk about remote physiological monitoring or remote patient monitoring, those are the types of things that are starting to get traction. And I think that as you show that you are able to, again, from the question before, that you're able to improve those outcomes, patient outcomes, that's what Medicare Advantage plans are looking for. That will translate over to the commercial space, because it's the commercial insurers who are running the Medicare Advantage plans. So that'll translate over to that space as well. And it's really, utilizing those digital applications to improve the outcomes, of the patient situations.
Thank
I think,
you.
I think one of the things, just to add real quick, is it's consumer interest and consumer demand is driving some of this too, right?
Absolutely.
Because what we had before was these tools were there, consumers weren't going to use them. So whether they paid for them or not, they just weren't going to use them. So now, to avoid the travel or avoid COVID or whatever, they're willing to use them. And that has been a big inflection point that would drive usage, and adoption drives coding, but coding leads the way, on what needs to be used and adopted.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John.
Thank you. We have two additional questions before I proceed. I just wanted to flag, we got a question about the slides. We will share the slides after the presentation. We'll send you a thank you note with some of the key links we discussed today. You can also save the chat. So if you open the chat window, there are 3 little dots at the bottom. You can use that to download the chat. Also wanted to draw your attention that we did post some links to that diversity supplement that we discussed earlier, as well as the ways to follow us on Twitter and fill out that feedback form. We really would like you to fill out the feedback form. We try to put on these events to help you, and we can make better programming, as well as understand what value this provides to you by you talking with us and letting us know what you feel about it. So please do that if you can. With that, I'll move to the final 2 questions. What impact will the aging population have on the delivery methods and modes of healthcare? John, do you want to take that?
Slide. NIA Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions Series.
Be happy to have anybody weigh on that. But I think, this is funny because it goes back to the 60s, and the people that were growing up in the 60s are now the boomers that changed everything, right? They changed travel and entertainment and food and style and housing. They changed everything. And I think Generation X comes behind with digital native status, where digital everything is already embedded in how they lived. I was a border boomer, and I learned Internet of Everything while I was an adult, or while I was in high school. I started learning how to do computer programming, but our kids don't know anything else, rotary phone and otherwise. So I think the best reimbursement is a consumer will pay for it because they love it and it works, right? And it doesn't need a code. The ones that can do everything, the codes will pay for it, managed care will pay for it. The consumer would buy it if they don't qualify otherwise. That tells me that this is going to be just like everything else. Consumer preference is going to drive where we go. And the key is, again, we have 2 distinct populations, boomers and Generation Xers, and they have different tastes in where they go and what they do. But I think we're right now in the midst of an evolution of senior living and skilled nursing, to the extent that it's going to be reinvented. It might be reinvented as a virtual extension. It might be reinvented as the way brands and services come across multiple dimensions. But again, I think most of the work is going to be around life, living well, and well-being as the focus, and then care being the attribute of living well and well-being, and that'll be everybody's momentum moving forward. I mean, I always call it good sick care is part of health, and health's part of well-being, but well-being's a goal. So I think consumer domination and consumer preference will be speaking loud and clear, and especially after what we went through in the pandemic with family members and residents being isolated and separated. There has to be a better way, but I can tell you that, and Brian's a good testament to this, it's not inexpensive to change the system. I mean, the system is embedded for a reason, and to change, nobody disagrees that caregiving should be rewarded well and paid well, but the economics of reimbursement limit what we can do. So I think consumers are going to push us through, but I think it's going to be shifting the responsibility and the preferences to the consumer wallet and the families of consumers.
Slide. Connect with NIA. Visit nia.nih.gov/SBIR. Follow us on Twitter at NIA_SBIR. Follow us on LinkedIn, NIA Office of Small Business Research. View upcoming events and funding opportunities. Join our mailing list. Questions? Email niasmallbusiness@mail.nih.gov.
Thank you. So another question we got was, how does a small business go about considering or approaching market segmentation? And John, you've spoken a lot to being customer centric, and Brenda, you've also talked about how you explore that, even going into nursing homes to meet live with potential customers. What advice would you have for the small businesses that are listening?
I'm happy to weigh in, and I think Beth, you want to weigh in? Beth, go ahead, weigh in.
Well, I think it's interesting that with the digital technology, there may be more than one piece of this puzzle that you saw John lay out where you can play. So one thing that we're working on is, I know the Medicare Advantage plans are really interesting to us, of course. And so is the senior living world, and grant funding through states for nursing home implementation. And I really didn't expect to be working with health systems like Mayo, senior living, home care, hospice, and state funding, federal funding. I mean, and health plans, right? So just, I guess you may end up starting in one space, but then watch, because they interact. They touch each other. You may find yourself in one and then you end up in another. So be open.
One of the things that we sort of lead with, if you're a small business, is just write out to me the attributes of your customer that you can add value to, right?
Yeah.
And if you give me age and gender and ethnicity, that's okay. But why don't you give me, are they a homebody? Are they a socialite? Are they nervous and structured and stay close to the vest? Do they have they raised their kids and want to travel now, and they're experiential? I think at the end of the day, go to the personalities of the customer and map out how you enhance their life. Then you'll know who you're looking for, and where they are will become much more evident. Because I mean, if you go to a senior living community or go to an independent living community and you're standing there at happy hour, it's a happy time. If you're in the pool, it's some exercising going on. I joked around with my wife. I said I wanted to beat the rush and buy in early. She didn't agree yet, but I do think it's not the senior living communities in your mind. It's not the nursing homes in your mind. But if you don't know what you're enhancing or solving, then it's awful hard to figure out where they're gathered or where they're convened, what conference, what association, what life, where they live. And it's easy to say there's 106 million longevity economy opportunities for customers. It's a lot harder to figure out a good, viable business model that can be sustained and viable trying to go after that.
And I'll just add that we've figured out that we have to stay pretty focused on B2B right now, right? It's really exciting to look at what we can do direct to consumer, right? Because we just help anybody tell their life story. But for us as a small business, we have to keep our eye on how we work with organizations first. And from there, we'll get to that consumer. Yeah. But John, you make a good point, really understand who's your customer and really think through it. And John gave a great, that one slide where you had all the things that you got to do to measure where you're at. You got to use that.
Beth and John, thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you, John Reinhardt. Thank you, Brian Abraham. And thank you, Beth Sanders, for all the nuggets of wisdom you provided today. If there's any last comments you want to share with our participants before we close.
I was just going to thank everybody for their time, and certainly, if there are any additional questions, I'm happy to take those offline.
Slide. NIA Age Tech and Digital Health Solutions Series.
And I just want to thank the NIA team for welcoming me aboard as a serial entrepreneur into their team, and all the work and all the skills and all the innovation that's coming out of this group. Who knew, as a serial entrepreneur, who knew that I would be in a government group doing such purposeful work? But I feel very blessed every day, and I know it's mutual. We learn from each other. I learn from all the entrepreneurs, and it's been great.
Delighted to have you, John. Again, thank you all.
Slide. Connect with NIA. Visit nia.nih.gov/SBIR. Follow us on Twitter at NIA_SBIR. Follow us on LinkedIn, NIA Office of Small Business Research. View upcoming events and funding opportunities. Join our mailing list. Questions? Email niasmallbusiness@mail.nih.gov.
Thanks, John, Beth, and Brian, and thank you all of you for listening in. I did see a note of folks wanting more information about November 9th. We will include that in the thank you note with some of the presenters and the links to register. With that, thank you to everyone for joining us today. And final reminder to please fill out that feedback form as well as follow us online. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Slide. Your feedback is important to us. Please share your feedback at link questionnaire